cannabis scheduling, a little step for humankind, a giant step for policymakers at the UN. On December 2nd, 2020, 63rd reconvened C&D session in Vienna will have to vote on WHO recommendations about cannabis and its related products. This will signify a monumental change in the codifying of the medicinal value of cannabis. Further, it will provide clarity around the international trade of CBD products. Head of Advocacy for Alternative Approaches to Addiction, from France, Farid Ghehioueche.
Hello, good morning, Sawadee Kap. My name is Farid Ghehioueche. I'm very honored to be part of the Cannabis Investment Summit World, and I thank the organizer for inviting me. Today I'm presenting some information about the current process at the UN regarding the cannabis scheduling status, and so I titled my presentation, Cannabis Scheduling, a little step for humankind, but a giant step for the policymakers at the UN. I'm part of the executive committee of AIMCOD. I was a founder of a think and do tank named FAAAT, and I was also part of those who take the initiative in 2009 to create Cannabis Without Borders, and in 2014, Normal Friends. So, since the UNGAS in 2016, the UNGAS is the special session of the General Assembly of the United Nations. They issued a declaration in which they clearly stated that the current framework of the international conventions are allow for sufficient flexibility for state parties to implement national drug policy according to their priorities and needs. And this is very important to underline this, that at national level, each state is sovereign to develop its own and to implement its own policy on drugs, and especially when the purpose is to give a better life, a better standard of living for the citizen. So after this outcome, what will occur in next December, in December the 2nd, the UN will have a Commission on Narcotic Drugs will have to vote on 6 recommendations to change the history, because this is the first time ever in history that the real scientific assessment was conducted at UN level. And so the WHO ECDD, WHO World Health Organization ECDD Expert Committee on Drugs Dependence, issued 6 recommendations to be voted next December the 2nd. If we go back to the process, we can say that it has been a very long procedure to achieve a real cannabis, a real scientific assessment on cannabis. And so if we look back in the history, you will find back in the C&D resolution 52/5 in 2009, the request from member state to initiate this cannabis review and some substances review. And then the committee initiated the process in 2012, and the ECDD starting to work on it, on its differentiation, as written here, as 35, 37, and 38 meetings. And then we have another step. The ECDD review on cannabis and cannabis-related substances was made because It was recommended and based on the increased use of cannabis and its component for medical purpose, the emergence of new cannabis-related pharmaceutical preparations for therapeutic use. As you may know, now there is Epidiolex, some of those medicine drugs that are very useful to treat some very specific pains. But mostly that cannabis had never been subject to a formal pre-review or critical review by the ECDD. And so this is quite important to know that cannabis has been scheduled as a narcotic drugs without any scientific proof. So the real sessions that made the pre-review and the critical review of the cannabis and the cannabis-related products was conducted on the meeting of the ECDD, the 40th and the 41 session of the ECDD. And at that time, they considered the best available scientific evidence and data from member state provided through the annual WECDD member state questionnaire. So they asked the member states to answer the annual questionnaire. In addition, member state, member of the public, civil society group, pharmaceutical industry representative, and other relevant groups were also able to comment and to give their feedbacks and background information about ECDD assessments and recommendations through an open session, through different open sessions at all ECDD meetings. So the vote on the recommendation from the 41 ECDD was postponed to allow for further dialogue between ECDD and member states through several rounds of question and answer at CND intersessional meetings. So the process has been quite long, and we all wait for this vote to be achieved on the December the 2nd. So the current status of cannabis and cannabis resin within the convention. I will try to be short, but it's quite very complex. So you have to understand that we have several convention treaties at UN level, and the main one is the single convention of 1961, which has 4 different schedules, and there is the Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 that are mostly define mostly having some substances according to their liability of abuse and the production of ill effects. The other part of the schedule are Schedule 3 and Schedule 4. The Schedule 3 is for all the medical preparation, and this is what is complex and difficult, very hard to understand, is that the Schedule 4 is particularly for harmful substances with very few therapeutic use properties. So you have to know that cannabis and cannabis resin are scheduled in Schedule 1 and Schedule 4 of the 61 Convention, that the extract and tincture of cannabis are listed on the Schedule 1, and the cannabis and cannabis resin are both listed in Schedule 1 and Schedule 4, and so that's why with the inclusion in the Schedule 4 of the 61 Convention, it makes very difficult for cannabis products to be traded as for their medicinal purposes. It's complex, but this scheduling is also reinforced by the 71 Convention, and substances that are listed in Schedule 1 to 4 in the 71 Convention are on broadly inverse scale of risk to public to therapeutic usefulness. This is very important to distinguish both treaties, convention, but also to understand that the scheduling is not with the same scale. So currently, tetrahydrocannabinol as a molecule, tetrahydrocannabinol, THC, is classified in Schedule 1 because it is supposed to present serious risk to public health and limited, if any, of therapeutic usefulness. While the delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol is classified in the Schedule 2, the schedule that is for the substantial risk to public health and little to moderate to therapeutic usefulness. This is very important to understand those scheduling because this is the current state for cannabis and cannabis resin. It has been scheduled in 61 in the single convention without any scientific proof. Then in 71, there was the psychotropic convention, and then the molecule, the active ingredient of cannabis has been also scheduled. But then no other cannabinoids or substances has been subject to scheduling, and mostly the work of the ECDD has been to try to seek out if the current scheduling was appropriate to the realities of today. So if we look into the scheduling, this is mostly for the trade restriction that are different from one schedule to another one. And so THC is therefore subject to different trading restriction from the plant material in which it naturally occurs. And that's very important to note that. Because it's, I would say, part of the complexity of the UN system regarding the scheduling. So if we look about the WHO ECDD recommendation, what is the content of those recommendations? So for cannabis and cannabis resin, they recommend one thing that is historical and very important, is to remove from Schedule 4 and to keep it in Schedule 1 of the 61 Convention, as it is not particularly harmful. For example, use is not associated with a significant risk of death. The extract and tinctures to be removed from the convention, as it is a complicated term to interpret, covering preparation that have psychoactive properties, as well as those who do not have it. So it will be replaced by a new entry in the Schedule 3 of the 61 Convention, referring to pharmaceutical preparation of cannabis that do not pose risk to the public health. So we can see that the ECDD has quite worked well in order to find some rationale and to put, I would say, the international scheduling into a scheduling that is more appropriate and more accurate regarding the realities, but also with the scientific research and mostly the discoveries that has been made since 61. So if we look about the recommendation regarding the 71 Convention, where I already told you that it's mentioned about delta 9 THC and dronabinol, which is the name of the delta 9 THC in the pharmaceutical sector. So it is quite important to note that the ECDD also completed its recommendation regarding this convention, especially to delete from the 71 Convention Schedule 2 and move to the 61 Convention in Schedule 1 with cannabis and cannabis resin. Because primarily considered a pharmaceutical preparation, it primarily refers to the main psychoactive component of cannabis, and this will be a similar approach as for coca leaf with cocaine or with poppy and morphine, opium poppy and morphine. And then regarding the recommendation, there is THC isomers, and so the ECDD recommended also to delete it from the 71 convention, from the Schedule 1, and to move it to the Schedule 1 of the 61 convention. So to put it in broad and quite simply, I would say the ECDD recommendation try to put in the same place in order to have something that is more rational, but in the same place, in the single convention of the 61. And then it's quite, I would say, an effort to find a little bit of coherence. And then the last but not least, and it is very important to note that the ECDD also made a recommendation about cannabidiol, because it is quite subject to nowadays to a lot of controversy. Is it a compound that should be considered as narcotic drugs or not? And CBD, cannabidiol, has been clearly searched by the ECDD, and then they had a footnote to their presentation, to their recommendation, sorry, that products containing predominantly CBD and not more than 0.2% of delta-9 THC are not under international control. And so they are explicitly excluded, as there is no relevant risk for public health. And this is very important to note that the ECDD work on this cannabidiol and clearly stated that as a single compound, it has no no effects that could be that could lead for its classification, its scheduling as narcotic drugs. So, just to put it in bold, this is a historical and universal change that will have to be voted on December the 2nd. It signified a monumental change in the codifying of the medicinal values of cannabis, and this is very important. Further, it provides clarity around the international trade of CBD products, and this is also very important in the situation we are today. Just to let you know that this very complex issue will be voted on December the 2nd, and this is the way the UN has tried to show up about those recommendations. If you want to read it, you can, but you can also easily find this little chart in the UN website, unodc.org. So you see, the vote will be quite complex, and there is also different type of votes. For if you vote on the 61 convention, then you need the majority of the CND members. But when you vote for the change in the 71 convention, then you need a 2/3 majority. And this is very complex, but I won't go into details because we have to wait. And until now, and until December the 2nd, we have to lobby our government to vote for it, and especially those 53 governments that will be the voters. And just to go a little about the details, about the debate, about this ongoing process where we can see that there is a huge gap between the pros and the cons. Interestingly, for me as a French, we have a very specific law in France that is very hard, but we have been very pleased to note that French diplomats, French officials in the UN in Vienna stand strong behind the WHO, and not even France, but also USA, while Russia, Nigeria, and large coalition of countries are pushing against. France, and that will be the purpose of of, uh, my next slide. France has been very tough in the statement they release, and here you find some of the words that have been uh, expressed during the different intercessions specifically organized on those recommendations from the WHO. And it is important to note that France clearly stated that we think, fully prepared to vote on this recommendation as the CND reconvenes next December, as we collectively agreed to last March. This is important to note this because there is still a will to postpone or to avoid the vote, and the recommendation has been issued 1 year ago, and the patients can't wait anymore. And some states are also in need to get those changes in order to have a better policy. Oh, sorry. So to return back to the French contribution, as we vote on this recommendation next December, we must remember the main objective of the international conventions is to protecting the health and the well-being of all population. And I guess that it is the purpose of all member states to ensure that their population are safe and healthy. And so if we look further in the French declaration, they also clearly stated that at the same time, the international conventions are also built on the premises that they should reflect the scientific evolutions, and that the medical use of narcotic drugs continues to be indispensable for the relief of pain and suffering. And this is also important to note that, because when politicians say that cannabis has no medical values, now with the ECDD recommendation, we will be able to say it's not anymore the case. So if we look about the French, but it was quite the same kind of statement delivered by USA and some of the countries that are supporting the WHO recommendation. So this is why we call on all CND members to deal with the recommendation of the WHO through a scientific-based and non-ideological approach. We must be able to show that the international scheduling system remains relevant, that we remain vigilant on drug abuse, and that we won't compromise on drug trafficking and drug-related social harms, while also being able to accommodate scientific evolutions. It was quite very nice to hear that kind of a statement, because the CND has the real duty to work on this, the recommendation made by WHO, and this is part of their mandate. I will conclude my presentation by trying to invite you to closely follow up this website and to find some very important information about what I tried to summarize here. Kenzie Riboulet-Zemouli, my colleague, has been very deeply involved into that process. And I would like to emphasize that this website, the CND Monitor, is really, really the best tool, the perfect tool to closely monitor what your government will do, what your representative will do at the UN. So it's important to support and to regularly get some information from those websites. So please note these addresses. On FAAAT.net, you will find quite a lot about the process at the UN. If you go on ENCODE website, then you will find one of the best European coalition of groups that are trying to promote reform of the drug policies. Then, as a French, I would like to emphasize recognize the role of normal.fr. And so if you want to ask me a question or to get more information, please send me an email. And I would like again to thank you, all the organizers from Cannabis Investment Summit World, and especially Jack Ma and you and Dominique, and thank you for what you have provided us. And I wish you all the best, and thank you. Have a nice day. Bye. Kom Kuprap.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ghehioueche. We look forward to hearing more from you in our discussion panel if you plan on attending, because I believe there are going to be plenty of people ready to openly discuss and agree with you about rescheduling THC and CBD and all its derivatives. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.
Thank you very much. See you. Bye.
Okay.